Since we last recorded, Soph, the world has gone mad.
What does this mean across the agriculture sector? I feel like it's going to touch a lot of parts of the supply chain.
Donald says that it's all going to be over very quickly, but if we look at history, wars in the Middle East have never gone particularly well or particularly fast.
An attack on another country affects us right back on farm in a small area of the UK. It's actually quite crazy now.
What do levy payers get from the AHDB?
It's a really fair challenge because
We spoke to Minette in January, obviously with her farm profitability review. She was quite challenging towards the AHDB.
This episode is brought to you by our headline sponsor, Virgin Money. Virgin Money's experience in agriculture goes back generations. They offer tailored financial support, including funding and loans to help you diversify, as well as solutions to manage your everyday farming finances. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Meet the Farmers, The Big Debate, the show in which we tackle the biggest issues, topics, and headlines in food and farming across the UK and beyond. I'm Sophie Gregory.
And I'm Ali Hunt-Blair, and since we last recorded, Soph, the world has gone mad, it would seem. We were very happily talking about food security before we went away and thinking that, it's one of those things that no one needs to worry about, and this just-in-time delivery all goes fine. And then the episode came out on Friday, and then that Saturday, Donald decided to go and bomb Iran.
It's been quite a mad period of time, hasn't it? My 14-year-old came home and said, do you know we're in World War III? I said,
Yeah.
I don't really know where that's come from, but that's the feeling in that generation, which is quite a scary thing, really, to be honest.
It is a scary thing, and we are going to be discussing that in depth. Our news story this week is the only thing that's in the news currently, which is going to be the Iran crisis and impact that's going to have on us as farmers. I'm also going to have a chat with Emily Norton, from the chair of the AHDB, about where she thinks the AHDB should go, and also whether we're getting value for money from the AHDB. But as always, a big thank you to our headline sponsor, Virgin Money, and our associate partners, Birketts and TELUS Agriculture and Consumer Goods. For context, we are recording this on the 12th of March, and it will be released on the 13th of March. We also have another bonus episode for you this week. We're talking to Sasha Waldridge from Birketts about seasonal workers and on-farm labour. So if you have any questions about that topic, you'll be sure to want to check that out. Please subscribe to the show if you don't already, and sign up to our mailing list. The link, it will be in the show notes. But my favourite question, as always, Sophie, where are you this week?
I'd love you to guess, but I don't think you can. I am in Scotland, actually.
You're in Scotland?
I'm actually not that far from when we went to visit Cami and Iona. I'm at Dumfries House.
Ooh.
Yeah, I know. It sounds very royal. It is very royal. But I'm actually here to give a talk on careers in agriculture. They've got a careers day. 100 kids have come through the building today, mainly from towns, a couple from rural areas, but a lot of them are either interested in agriculture or have no idea what they want to do when they're older. So it's a really good opportunity to try and bring some new youngsters into the sector.
Oh, your life, Soph. Your life. I don't know. We're always just out there influencing people. What else has been going on the farm for the last couple of weeks?
Well, I think the only theme on the farm is that we have calved 100 cows. Bear in mind, our kickoff date is the 10th of March. I think we're probably 110, 120 by now. We're just getting to the point where actually probably going to move the calving block because it's getting earlier and earlier, and these springs seem to be getting wetter and wetter. So actually, yeah, all systems go on calving. Cows are calving really well. The team are doing really well. But yeah, it's quite a busy period on farm. How about you, Ali? What have you been up to?
That's why you fled to Scotland, and then it's just all heating
Just
up a bit too much.
sleep.
That's amazing. I love the fact you had 100 calves before you're due to start calving. When we were lambing back in the day, like we'd always end up with a lamb randomly at Christmas when we were due to start in March. But I don't think we ever had 100 lamb before we were start to. So that's good. What has been going on? Actually, it dried up enough for us to get some fertilizer out, which is great. The crops, we haven't really had a cold winter, so they never really stopped. But to chuck some fertilizer around and put some fertilizer onto them, and they have motored in the last week. Although it is now chucking it down and gaily and horrible again. I saw I think it was on Facebook or something, there was potatoes going into dust in Norfolk, and I was very, very jealous. But we've also been we're doing a fertilizer trial, which is exciting for me because I like that sort of stuff. So we're doing a liquid fertilizer trial. I quite like the idea of the uptake of nutrients through liquid, but it rots sprayers for fun. It's basically an acid, effectively, that you're putting through your very expensive sprayer. So that's quite interesting. Yeah, we're going to split a field of rape and split a field of wheat, and we're going to do 2/3 of the nitrogen requirement through liquid and solid, and see if we get any noticeable improvement. The idea of not having fertilizer bags on farm is particularly exciting.
Enough to do it.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is. So I've heard on the grapevine from our guest from last week that one of your tractors may have been involved in an accident.
In a collision with a barn.
With a barn?
So our poor little Red, our scraper tractor, who's 4.5 years old, done a very good hard job for the last we've had it from new actually. It beds up, it scrapes shit. We mainly use it over the winter, to be honest. Other than that, it's sat up for the rest of the time, but it does a lot of hours. Had a bit of a collision and has actually been written off. Oil was leaking everywhere. It had to be towed out of the yard. Poor little Blue has actually had to turn its hand to scraping shit, which for that type of tractor is a bit of a waste. So we've gone out, got prices, and just bought a New Holland version of our case. I'll be sad to see the little red one go, but I mean, I think it's actually quite scary where machinery prices have changed since we bought that red one, is what I will say. We will definitely be spreading the cost of it.
Yeah, I know the feeling with that. All machinery prices are now terrifying, but nice to have another blue tractor on the farm. It's the only way to go, really. I'm sad that there's a blue tractor scraping poo for a living, though. I always feel like that is the lowest job of the low for a tractor. Like if you were sort of emulating Tractor Ted and they were all having a discussion, or no, Thomas the Tank, they're all having a discussion in the barn at the end of the day, you would be like, oh yeah, so I go out and I'm on the mixer wagon. I'm the cows wouldn't get fed without me, and then there's poor little Blue in the corner like, oh well, I scrape poo for a living. Oh.
Yeah. One day I might get called up for something bigger.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just waiting for my opportunity. That links us on into the news this fortnight. Normally we'd have 2 news stories for you, but sadly, as I'm sure when you switch on the television or the radio, you realise that there is only one real big news story at the moment, and that is the bombings in Iran coming from America mainly, obviously now being supported by different countries. That has changed dramatically since we were last recording, and it is having an impact across the world. And more than anything else, this blocking of the Strait of Hormuz is going to become something that I think is going to be very, very serious to agriculture in the UK and across the world.
It's quite terrifying, isn't it, Ali? I feel a little bit like we're back when Ukraine started. I'm already getting the feelings that feed will be quite a bit more expensive next season. What does this mean across the agriculture sector? I feel like it's going to touch a lot of parts of the supply chain.
Yeah, there's a huge impact, isn't there? Especially when we're looking at fertilizer, we're looking at fuels. The Strait of Hormuz, which is the channel between the Persian Gulf and the Arabian Sea, is a vital piece of water for us to be able to get oil out. It's a massive shipping channel that a lot of the world's oil for other inputs comes through, and suddenly when that is inaccessible or being slowed down or being blocked, then the knock-on effect is massive. We've spoken about it before on the podcast. Is we as a world live on just-in-time delivery, and that works beautifully when just-in-time is enough. But suddenly you put a delay somewhere. We saw it again when the Suez Canal got blocked. It's amazing how quickly things change, and suddenly the conversations that we were having a couple of weeks ago where talking about security and feeding a region suddenly look a lot more prevalent. But there's huge costs for everything because a lot of machinery comes out of there as well. A large part of the supply chain comes through this Strait of Hormuz, and without us being able to access that, it becomes very problematic. And I guess the biggest one that we've been seeing a lot at the moment is fuel.
This is not the time to start, ringing up and asking for a price on, feed or milk powder or all of those things, because obviously it's going to be high. But actually, as a farming community, we do need fuel on a daily basis, most of our systems. So it's not something we can say, oh, actually, I'm just going to wait this out because we need it right now. I've heard some really crazy stats. Friends were talking about red diesel being quoted at for 5 days' time, £1.50 plus VAT, but then they were seeing at the pump down the road white diesel at £1.49, including VAT. So pretty crazy. And I suppose I think we're seeing it across the UK, and we always see this with fuel prices. Each moves at its own pace in terms of where we are. Wales has always got cheaper fuel prices, always fill up when I'm in Wales. But the fact that they can then drive their telehandler down to a garage, fill up cheaper than they can wait for fuel for 5 days' time. I dread to think what it's going to be in 10 days' time.
But I think that's a huge element of profiteering, and I was angry actually. We had some red diesel delivered on Monday, although I will be quiet now because it was only £1.07 plus VAT, and I thought that was ludicrous considering the last red diesel we had in October was 68p. So it's up 57% in however many months, and also up about 50% in 2 weeks because of this. And actually, I was looking through our records. We bought white diesel into tank at 109 plus VAT in October, and I've just bought red diesel, which has 11p's worth of duty versus 54p's worth of duty for 107. But the annoying thing is that I know it's going to be a restocking cost, but the fuel that they had in store to be able to bring it to us on Monday, they have not paid however many dollars a barrel to create it from. You know, it's not the $120 mark. They've been much lower than that. So when you hear that, I mean, that 150 plus VAT is absolutely mental. And it's hit kerosene as well. They charged us for Kero, which is, just heating oil effectively. We use it for our dryer as well. But that was £1.15. And it hits, I mean, we're getting a bit broad here, but it hits the people that need things the most. Like if you're looking at heating oil particularly.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? And you talked about the Strait of Hormuz carries around 20% of the global oil supply. It's so easy for us, isn't it, to just all these things that are readily available to us to just accept we can just go out and buy them. Is there anywhere that's actually short of fuel, that you can't actually access any fuel?
Yeah, well, I spoke to a follower of mine actually who messaged me saying she's in Australia and they've already got pumps that have no fuel, and they're saying that actually it's independent fuel stations that have been affected worse because the big companies are just keeping it for themselves to be able to make sure that they can supply their own chain. So if you're an independent, they're not letting you buy fuel from them and they're just keeping it to themselves. I guess the other thing is just the timing. I mean, there's never a good time for a war, is there? That's a stupid thing to say by me, but from a UK perspective, very insular, the fuel usage of the country from an agricultural point of view is going to become hitting its peak in the next month. You know, all of the arabalists that have been skiing and sleeping are now going to be out here burning 100 litres an hour in their big tractors, trying to get spud ground ready, trying to get vegetable crops ready. The spring season is upon us. I know a friend of mine that's just bought a 12,000 litre diesel tank secondhand and is just filling it because the last thing he wants is to have his tractors sat idle in a lovely, glorious spell after it being so wet and he can't actually get the crops in.
Yeah, it sounds like the prices are varied very much across the country. I mean, Farmers Weekly's updated prices yesterday, red diesel at 108.7, last week 98.4, and this is probably the maddest figure, is last year 69p. I mean, that is actually out of this world, isn't it?
I think that variation is mad. 150 sounds insane. I was back mad at 107, but then a friend of mine that bought the tank, he was quoted 110, and then I had a quote actually came in yesterday. They wouldn't quote me last week, but they came in at 95p. So if I'd waited, I would have actually saved myself 12p a litre. It puts the cost of production on food, and that's the thing, is that it's this passing it on, isn't it? That's the thing that farmers have always not struggled with, but when our input costs go up, we don't tend to pass that on.
Have you bought fertilizer recently, or are you planning to buy? What's the situation with the fertilizer?
So fertilizer, I think, is a really interesting one. Unfortunately, like I said, I've mentioned before, we're doing this trial with this liquid versus solid, and one of the negatives of liquid is that potentially, depending on when you buy it, price per unit of nitrogen is more expensive in liquid than it is solid, and that's one of sort of to go on the negative list when you're looking at comparing. But because of that, I've been chatting to our fertilizer supplier, so Finley, who is giving me a really nice update on what's going on. Obviously, fertilizer is produced by gas, and the gas price has risen sharply. And because the gas price has risen sharply, obviously the cost of production has risen greatly. So we bought our fertilizer, which is 34.5% nitram. So it's a prilled nitrogen product. It's made by CF. Theoretically, it's made in the UK, but obviously we have to import our nitrogen because we don't actually produce that ourselves, because why would we do that when we can import it? We bought ours for £340 per tonne. I think if you could get some today, he said the pricing now starts with a 5 in front of it. So it's not going to be long before I might be better off selling my fertilizer in the shed than putting it onto the crops. Because if we get a drought, it doesn't get used anyway. So I might as well sell it for 600 quid and make myself a profit.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, where else do you think it will be touching? I know I've heard already that Tom Bradshaw's been in government to actually raise awareness on this. The last thing government want is higher food prices. It doesn't sit well with them. It never sits well in government. It's one of their lobbying tactics. Are we too part of a global food system now that actually, we're at the peril of what happens next?
I think we are a bit. I think the thing we probably just missed on the fertilizer side there is that also it's not necessarily the pricing. Pricing is obviously a major part, but it's actually getting product to the UK. That's as much of a problem as the pricing. Supply and demand is always going to do the whole price thing, but actually, if product is stuck on a boat, then that makes no difference, whatever the price is, because you can't sell it if you haven't got it. And I think that's as important. We're coming obviously into peak fertilizer season in the next 6 weeks, and people are waiting fertilizer. I know friend Tom, he's waiting fertilizer, doesn't know where it is, sat on a boat. So it's something we're going to have to watch. I mean, Donald says that it's all going to be over very quickly, but if we look at history, wars in the Middle East have never gone particularly well or particularly fast. So I'm not sure I would believe that. There's a whole global sector to this, isn't it? And that's the thing. We always try to reach out on that a bit more.
Absolutely. And I think that goes, for every sector. I'll talk from a dairy point of view, we import quite a lot of feed cows, on a low milk price and increasing feed price. That doesn't look good for supply. Maybe it's what we need to sort it out. It'll be interesting, depending on whether your theory is right around America. It'll be interesting. The dairy over there is so linked to the oil price, because they are a very oil-based system. So they have a system that relies on a lot of mechanicalization. It'll be interesting how quickly that drops off if the price rises. At the moment, we don't see a lot of milk volumes coming back in America because they've had a historically low oil price. But at that amount per litre, if they were seeing the same litres price per litre, then they would really be thinking about bringing that back down.
I guess we've been looking at a period of stability as well, across, Western countries particularly, and inflation had been dropping down to roughly where the government wanted it. And suddenly you put the fuel price up by, our local pump has gone from 140 something up to 160 something. So that's a big indicator of inflation. So next month's inflation figure will be back up again, which will then knock on effect to the Bank of England. If we look back to the UK, because that's the sort of the borrowing sector I know from. So the Bank of England will then be hard pushed to keep interest rates the same because inflation will have gone up. And that whole knock-on effect of one country being bombed without looking at any of the humanitarian side of it is very, very difficult, because inflation will creep up, meaning that interest rates will probably creep up after a period of stability. And the impact of that, it has to be an inflation in food prices as well. Like that's where it has to go to, because otherwise we are going to be doing, as the once Labour minister said, doing more for less, as they wanted us to do.
As we've said, Ali, it's covering global and cross-sector. So I think it's a watch this space. I think panic slowly. Keep telling myself in my head, little voice in my head saying that. Buy what you need, for me, is always the way I roll. But I don't have the capacity to fill up multiple tanks of fuel. And as you said, it's varying totally across country. Let's hope there's a resolution. It's very hard to think that none of this affects you on farm. And actually, this is like a real eye-opener for a lot of us, that actually we are so connected to the whole supply chain in just one person deciding to make an attack on another country affects us right back on farm in a small area of the UK. It's actually quite crazy now. Well, leading on from that, up next, you've been interviewing Emily Norton today. The topic was, what do levy payers get from AHDB?
I am delighted to say that we've got Emily Norton, who was appointed chair of the HDB last year. who has come to join her. There's a long list of accolades that Emily has as well, but currently one of them is the chair of the AHDB. I don't know, Emily, if you could just introduce yourself and how you got to be chair of the AHDB to start off with, that'd be great.
Okay, thanks, Sally. And thank you so much for inviting me on as well. It's really lovely opportunity to be here, and having been aware of the podcast and seeing what you've been doing, it's a real honour to be invited to take part. So for those of you who don't know me at all, I was born into farming in Norfolk, grew up on a mixed dairy and arable farm. I currently run the smaller version of that following succession planning with my parents, just coming towards the end of a mid-tier countryside stewardship scheme. So exploring what we're going to do next from that perspective. But fundamentally, it has always given me the opportunity to work a lot off farm. So I've done a variety of roles across the industry. Most recently, I was head of rural research at Savills, which is a very interesting role. Looking at how the whole kind of post-Brexit landscape was evolving for the UK. I finished that in about 2023. And since then, I was invited to take part and do a couple of different non-executive director type roles. Hadn't really been in my intention to follow what's constantly called a portfolio career. But I saw the role of the AHDB chair advertised, and I thought, actually, do you know what? That's a really interesting organisation. I'm a huge fan of research, of good knowledge, of ensuring that something like the AHDB, which brings resources together to create something bigger than we can achieve by being individual, deserved some, attention and some love. And so I wanted to put myself forward to do that role, and was delighted when I was asked by the last farming minister to do so.
It's something that I guess the AHDB, it's always been there in my periphery, but I don't think I know as much as I feel I should for the size of the organisation. And I don't know whether that is just because I am ignorant, which is possible, but also whether, for me as a cereals farmer, the main things I take away from the AHDB are the monitor farms, which I think are excellent, and the recommended list, which is excellent, but I'm wondering whether it's starting to lose a bit of its relevance with the way that varieties are changing so quickly now, and also varieties are so similar. I guess as a cereals point, which I have to start with because it's my knowledge piece, is that I wonder where our levy goes, because I don't think I understand it as much as I should do, I guess.
Yeah, and it's a really fair challenge, because fundamentally AHDB exists to fix market failure. It exists to do the things that farmers and processors couldn't do by themselves. And so across the four sectors that we work in at the moment, for the three that you could say were consumer facing, which would be beef and lamb, pork and dairy, it's relatively obvious to put some of the resources into consumer facing marketing, and to have a much more kind of like visible brand for what AHDB does. And so even though there's a huge amount of other work that's going on behind the scenes within those sectors, that kind of front facing piece is sort of seen and valued, and therefore it's noticed more. As you've pointed out, across the C&O sector, we don't have that consumer-facing branding. You know, you're commodity producers. You are inherently producing stuff that goes into other stuff that then gets branded and then gets sold, right? So you're never going to have those marketing opportunities in the same way. And so that kind of noticing bit, as you've said, is softer. But that doesn't mean it's not valuable. The Monitor Farm Network exists in order to allow farmers to engage with other farmers and with best practice. And so it's an incredibly valuable way of making sure that farmers have access to those networks and to that knowledge. You're completely right about recommended lists. And I think there's just that evolution of how we do this kind of work is something that we're looking at deeply. So I think my overall challenge would be, though, that how across all of the sectors, how the money gets spent. So, you know, the money is generated when produce is sold off farm, essentially. How that money is spent is determined by levy payers. So our sector councils are representatives of farmers. So for C&O, for cereals and oilseeds specifically, farmers and processors, it's up to them to decide how the money is spent. And so us as the AHDB main board kind of look at the institutional level stuff and the overall governance of the organisation. But fundamentally, farmers and processors are the ones who are controlling how the money is spent. So the best way to kind of influence that is to get more involved in the AHDB itself, and begin to kind of learn that thing. So there's definitely work that can be done, but as a kind of that level of accountability back to farmers and growers is I think one of its strengths, and perhaps less well known.
Yeah, that's the same with all of these things, isn't it? Is that if you don't contribute, you shouldn't then be able to whinge when you don't get the things. The NFU is the same, exactly the same. It's the same thing is that people, myself included, would complain about something without contributing to that, and then that becomes that there is a route to contribute. It's the same actually. We sat in that cereals bit of the NFU where we were discussing how only 900 people replied to a government scheme, and then we were cross because we didn't get the outcome we wanted. And I suppose we sit there not contributing and then get cross because we don't get the output that we wanted. How do we encourage people to do that then? I feel like I still am fairly young and fairly forward thinking in the way that and open-minded.
Yeah.
How do you encourage people that are shut down to it completely, and would say that actually they don't understand where their levy goes, they don't, and not just the arable sector, but all sectors, and say, well, it's a complete waste of time, frankly, and I don't know what I'm getting back for my money. All I know is that every time I get my check in, there is so many pounds off it going towards the levy.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I'm always happy to pick up the phone and have a chat with anybody who's feeling like that. You know, it's absolutely part of it to kind of help people understand. But also, I think from my perspective, you know, continuously putting that bit of pressure on AHDB as a board to kind of say, well, how can we be more effective at making sure those messages are heard? How can we be more effective at say, this is really important that we punctuate this better, but it's certainly something that I'm aiming for is how can we do less better?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, you know, there's sort of this bit where you can be very noisy and you talk about kind of press agendas at the moment, but I think it's important that we communicate the key messages, the most important things that it is that we're doing that we feel and levy payer, so that the sort of the sector council structures feel are the most important and really major on just kind of getting those basic messages across, so that people have more of an opportunity to kind of know what we're doing. I think because there is a news cycle, because there's kind of quite a lot of noise and stuff that's going on, I think it is a danger of getting lost. And so part of the challenge in today's society when there's news being thrown around everywhere is that we focus on really important things that do sit behind the overall piece, and some of the work around nutrition is critical from that perspective, and not because we're being noisy about it, but because other people can then build their messages and their marketing campaigns on top of that information. But also just that sense of coming together and developing co-created solutions for the things that we're all facing. And I think that sense of evolution is incredibly important. So, Ali, over time, get involved, right? If you're passionate about this stuff and you're passionate about the future of the industry, it's a hugely valuable resource, but we can always do a better job of making sure that it's delivering as effectively as possible against what people feel is critical for their sector.
We spoke to Minette in January, obviously with her farm profitability review. She was quite challenging towards the AHDB and TIA and, I should explain, we're so bad with acronyms. TIA is the Institute of Agriculture and Horticulture, which almost feels like it crosses over with the AHDB anyway. And then we've got the UK Agri-Tech Centre as well. She was quite challenging towards whether there should be more unity between you, whether money is being spent well by having these three separate sectors, or whether there is more collaboration and potentially more, for want of a better word, cutting of some fat around the industries.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of bits of the farming profitability review that sort of AHDB were named in, and that was one of them. I mean, I can reassure everybody that, we've been having those conversations with TIA and the Agri-Tech Centres for, a very long time in terms of sharing best practice, understanding what good skills look like, understanding what good technology looks like. That's what they are majoring in and specialising in. And so that good work of collaborating and ensuring that we're amplifying each other's messages and not duplicating messages is absolutely critical to all of us, to be able to kind of do that work well. So I'm very interested in how the knowledge farms network can continue to grow. The more that we can do to highlight to every farmer where their local best practice farm might be, the better it will be. Because, farms are actually pretty small and the country is relatively big. So you might not know where your local one is, but it might also not be an AHDB farm. It might be a leaf demonstration farm. It might be part of, the Agri-Tech Centre network. There are lots of different kind of places. And so the more that we can do to amplify those resources and enable learnings in and how best to do stuff, the better. Fundamentally, with 3 different organisations, with 3 different governance structures, run for 3 different purposes, right? So you can't just mush them all together with a magic wand. So there's a sense of reality there, but that's not to say that making sure that we are fit for purpose and learning from each other and truly delivering against the things that other people aren't doing. If those people are doing it well, then AHDB doesn't need to do it, right? That's the point.
Yeah.
So we've got to avoid duplication wherever we can and maximize amplification where possible.
Yeah, and I guess that's my big thing for these sort of government agency type things is that I want you to be at the forefront. I want you to be looking at stuff that we're not thinking about, and that I want you to be ahead of the curve, I guess, as an agency, because I can look at a lot of things and we can do lots of things on farm and we can do lots of trials ourselves. We like to try things because I think there's a big part of what works nationally might not work on your farm. We always have this when it comes to machinery. It's like, it doesn't work here. It doesn't work here. Well, and until you try it, you don't know. So I guess that like you say, that the country's quite big. Every farm is so individual to what they require from an agency. It's very hard to you've got a very broad church to sing to, and trying to work out what key that needs to be in, I suppose, is difficult.
It's incredibly difficult because also you can't keep everybody happy. And if I am critical of how I have found AHDB, and it's not even I don't even really mean criticism, how I have found it is that it has been trying to keep everybody happy. I think particularly after the horticulture and potatoes vote, some of the strategy has just been, well, let's try and do a lot of stuff across a lot of places, rather than going, well, look, where are the most impactful things going to be? What are the biggest risks? What are the things that farmers can't do for themselves? Where should we be truly focusing resources and having a much more sort of systematic and helicopter view on those things to be able to drive, look 3 to 5 years ahead, do that stuff that individual farmers can't do, and be very confident that we will do a few things well, which is my point about less, better. Right. That's tricky because, we are, again, as I said, it is up to the sector councils, it's up to the levy payers on the sector councils to decide how the money is spent. So if there are near-term things that are immediate priorities for them, that's where the budget priority is going to go. So we've got to work all of the time in this bit where we're like, well, that's the near-term priority, but actually how do we gain resources and kind of create the justification for these things that our experts can then build as these longer term research projects, and kind of, use those other resources around the industry to be able to say, look, we need to be doing that hard works plan for 3, 5, 10 years ahead, not constantly looking here and now or slightly backwards. That will be the worst thing we can do. So there's this healthy tension all of the time to be doing that strategic stuff whilst also meeting present needs. And quite how you do that, it's never going to be 100% perfect. There's always a resource challenge there, right? But having that healthy tension and that continuous provocation to be looking ahead, I think, is critical.
Yeah, I think that better for less thing is interesting, because we were told by our lovely government that we should be doing more for less, and I found that really challenging this time last year, or whenever it was. We had government officials telling us you've got to do more and you're going to get less from it. And I feel like farming always. I was chatting to a farmer the other day actually about the same thing, is that we always seem to have to do something extra, but it creates no extra income or margin for us. But we have to tick another box the whole time, and that's something that I find really challenging in the sector, is that we are almost demanded more of. And we should demand a lot of ourselves. It's when we're being told what we should do, I suppose, is something that we find difficult. How much input do you have with government? I want to get onto the communications bit, because I think that, and also the international stuff, I think is really important, which I want to talk about in a minute. But how much input do you have from government going back and forwards, or do you sit very much on your own and you get on with it yourself?
No, so this is one of the sort of odd things about AHDB. I'm a ministerial appointment. All of the board are ministerial appointments. We've got the sector council chairs who are sort of levy payers, but also ministerial appointments.
Yeah.
And then we've got independent non-executive directors effectively around that table as well. So we are all accountable to government. We're all responsible to the Nolan principles and all of that kind of good stuff in terms of ministerial accountability. So we get good opportunity to speak with policymakers in DEFRA, people in, say, the Food Standards Agency. I'm trying to build out more of a network around the other arm's length bodies across DEFRA, and then also into the farming minister. And I've just been on this trip to the US with the Secretary of State as well. What AHDB cannot do, though, is lobby. We don't do lobbying. We do evidence and insight. And and I sort of think, again, this is where I'd like to push us to be more confident. We don't lobby. We sort of provide information to, say, the likes of the NFU, who can then go and develop a lobbying position on a particular kind of topic or issue. But I think evidence-based policy making is really, really important. So where are we building the evidence to say these are effective things that government can do to make the job better or more profitable or whatever it might be, right? So that's a fine line. But it's one that I think that we should be confident to say we're allowed to have an opinion. It's entirely up to government whether we listen to it or not. It's got to be based upon evidence, science, best practice, and informed by the market realities that we're facing into.
Which is exactly what I would want as a farmer, because I would want, sometimes we sit there and we think some of this policy is just dreamt up in a tower somewhere in London that we don't understand, and we want actual farm information to be fed in, and it's something that we've been, as an industry, have been sort of arguing about for years. Is we want more people in DEFRA to have a better boots on ground understanding, I suppose, and the AHDB. We don't need you to be a lobbying body, do we? But we do need almost a lobby body to be able to communicate with the AHDB, to be able to communicate with the government, so that if we do something forward, or we do say, well, this just doesn't work, to have the evidence to be able to back that up is important.
And so from that perspective, independence, I think, is a really kind of undervalued characteristic of the AHDB that we need to do more to champion. And so, when we're looking at kind of how other levy bodies work around the world, quite often they are sort of part funded by farmers and then, say, part funded by government, particularly around sort of, say, an export type objective. But that funding from government loses some of the independence. We're only funded by farmers. And so, we in that way, we're largely only accountable to farmers, or, being part of the DEFRA family means, we're actually answerable to the National Audit Office. So, it's a sort of slightly different dynamic. But the independence of the advice of the AHDB and in the market intelligence and everything, and the independence of all of that stuff that AHDB is creating is absolutely critical to its value. So, it's not beholden to any particular agenda, and therefore it's trusted. And so that is really, really, really valuable to hold on to. And how we develop ourselves as an organisation going forwards, we have to hang on to that, because that's what farmers need. They need trusted, independent advice. And that's really what AHDB can do well.
Yeah, and I think we actually spoke about it before recording. You see the AHDB as a communications body, effectively, and trying to communicate that to farmers, but also outside of farming. And that's something that we try to look at, especially internationally. We try to look at on this podcast quite a lot, because we do sit in our own little UK bubble and get very passionate about how brilliant we are as UK farmers. But the world is a much bigger picture. Can you just explain a bit about that international role? Like you say, you were in Washington with the Secretary of State. Like, that access is phenomenal. What were you doing out there? And this sort of international angle, how does the AHDB push us? Minette, particularly in her report, was saying, we want to increase our exports. And I guess that's something that you could be crucial in.
So we have a real role to play there. I mean, it makes most sense across the livestock sectors, right, Ali? So I'm sorry, in terms of C&O, we're always going to be at that, depending on how good harvest has been. We're going to have an exportable surplus or not, right? So fundamentally, the issue, as across the red meat sector specifically, it can just be a fifth quarter valorization question. How are we getting the maximum value for the parts of the carcass that we can't or don't want to use in this country? But then there's also a value question. If you can build high value markets overseas, then that creates domestic competition. A domestic competition, can work at farm gate level, or it can mean you can invest against an opportunity to kind of use our strategic ability to produce really good food here to meet the needs of international consumers. So look, I get the role that exports plays in across red meat, across dairy. Is hugely valued, particularly in pig meat. We know this. So much is sent to China. It's such an important customer of ours. So AHDB works across that landscape to look at sort of just the trade deal element of it, to say, where have we got that ability to kind of do trade? Then there's a layer below that where you're looking at market access issues, which is sort of the technical bit. Have you got the permission to export the particular product in that particular way? And then below that, there's just the obviously commercial level of the businesses who want to exploit these opportunities, who want to find customers in these countries. And again, AHDB is there facilitating those conversations through the trade shows that we take part in and take our exporters to. So it works on sort of a variety of levels. And it was brilliant to be able to show the Secretary of State that, because I think from political level, you might think, well, let's do the trade deal, job done.
Yeah.
No, it's not that. There's lots of other kind of issues that, go beneath it. And ensuring that our abattoir network is set up, for the example we had last week for the USDA, USDA certifications are really tough. And so our abattoir network needs to be resourced and able and willing to kind of, exploit that and do that hard work to fulfill that opportunities. It was very good to be able to sort of show the Secretary of State the reality of this, not just the kind of here's a new 13,000 ton quota, well done. We got something, but the hard work that goes into then building a loyal customer base. But to answer your original question, British product is viewed hugely favorably overseas because it's trusted. And I think this is the message we frequently forget. You alluded to, the annoying pieces of paper that you have to fill in, right? Those annoying pieces of paper that you have to fill in are quite often the very mechanic under which we have trust in our food system. And the trust in our food system through things like assurance is what brings value overseas. So getting hold of UK produced food in overseas countries, it is trusted, and we could never do anything, I don't think, that would undermine that assurance, because in consumers' minds it's so powerful. So what's annoying to us is actually completely underpinning how consumers perceive our product in these incredibly invaluable markets.
Do you think there's more trust in our product internationally than there is domestically?
Arguably, yes, because it's a perception, isn't it? You've got an idea of what British produce is based on we are fundamentally green and pleasant land, right? So we need to underpin that brand identity of UK agriculture with the mechanics of doing things well, and then have huge pride in what we are doing in order to say not just that we are meeting our consumers' needs, but also that we're meeting our neighbours' needs.
Yeah.
And I think that's increasingly where this tension is coming from, is to say we can't exist in the silo of pretending that our consumers' needs aren't important or pretending that our neighbours' needs aren't important. And I think that's just this evolution that we're going on, understanding as an industry across all of us how important those things are. We can't have one at the expense of the other.
It is that trust in that little red tractor, I suppose, for us in the UK is a different kettle of fish, and we won't get onto that because I'll never be able to let you go. But I guess the other side, and Sophie would want me to ask, would be the dairy side. Obviously, as you mentioned there, the dairy sector internationally is huge. Cheese particularly is worth a great deal. And building, referring again back to Minette's report, like that brand Britain, building that particularly in something like cheese, it's something that is very important. Do you think that is, and I particularly that bit about where you said, okay, we've got the trade deal done, Secretary of State thinks fantastic, well done, I got it over the line. But actually the effort to then produce, package, export, distribute, the trade deal is 30% of the actual product on shelves abroad.
And that's why we're facing into this particularly horrible situation at the moment where the energy costs, the logistics of moving stuff from A to B is going to add so much cost that we are going to have to sort of rethink some of the dependencies we've got. But that, that's not just a downstream problem. It's really an upstream problem as well. And I think this is the key challenge that we're facing into. Again, the market realities of the theory of exporting cheese versus the commercial on the ground situation we are in now, of what it's going to cost extra to do that, and our consumers going to be, prepared to pay the additional value. So it's going to be incredibly challenging to work out how we lean into this situation, and what it means to have food as critical national infrastructure on a small crowded island, otherwise in the middle of the North Atlantic, right? So we're going to have to think about these things pretty carefully, depending on how this current situation plays out. It would be challenging an awful lot of assumptions about what good looks like.
What is your vision for your role now? What is the vision for maybe this next 12, 15 months of your role in AHDB? Where do you want it to go? I know you'll have had many thoughts about it. What is your vision for where you would like to see the AHDB going?
I think one of the things that we've really suffered from after Brexit is not having a clear vision for UK agriculture, right? We know it's been contested. We know that all of that stuff came in the Environment Act, and we all went, oh, okay, money's for the environment. And then we had all of the stuff that pre-existed on climate and, that kind of net zero idea hanging over us. And sort of the idea of food and farming for food got very lost within that whole message. So I think that's raising up the agenda now. AHDB is fundamentally about food, which is why I really, really like being involved in it as an organisation. But understanding that if you're producing food in this country and consuming food in this country, then you need to be investing against a viable future for food processing and manufacturing in this country. And therefore, we're all on the same side. Whether you're a retailer or a sandwich maker or a fast food joint or a farmer, we are all in the same situation. And I think that kind of thinking, the stronger together thinking, is incredibly important. So I sort of simply am trying to articulate it as a growth ambition for UK agriculture. I want us to go from being 0.6% of UK GDP to 1% of UK GDP. We do that by maximising the farm gate output. We do that by minimising the inputs that we're using. We do that by thinking about the cost of regulation, the cost of taxes, and the cost of subsidies coming into the sector. And by optimising those things, we build an idea that we are on this island for each other, for a really positive sector. And so just by setting a vision that says we are here for a reason, and the reason we are here is to enable our small hungry island to eat.
Yeah.
Right. And there are a lot of other businesses who want to invest against that vision. It makes us stronger. We have to be essential to our own future viability and not feel that we're a bit player or irrelevant. And I think we tell that story to ourselves far too much. Yeah, right. We've got to be essential and paint ourselves as being an essential part of our future national well-being. That's my vision.
And do what we're good at, which is producing food. It's something that we've done for generations. It's something that we are very good at. And we've almost been told ourselves that we've got to be doing all these other things. We've almost lost sight of that. What do farmers do from millennia ago? We produce food to feed people.
There's one caveat I would put on that, Ali, and that is that we produce food from nature.
Yeah.
We are fundamentally curating natural capital in order to produce something that's a surplus that we can consume. So I think the more that we get that idea baked in, the stronger we will be. This is not kind of nature over there and farming here. We do, we're taking soil, we're taking air, we're taking rain, we're taking all of these nutrients at every single level and managing that to create a edible surplus.
Yeah.
That management system, unbelievably important. This is not just food for food's sake. This is completely circular and curated, and that's what the farmer does well.
Yeah, and that is actually, and you've reminded me, the question that you asked me when you were here was, what does farming mean to you? Does it mean feeding people, or could it be feeding something else? And that was the question that you asked, insect life and everything else. So I think that is important. And it was mentioned at the conference, and Emma Reynolds mentioned it, is that we don't need to do it over one another. They can work harmoniously, something farmers have got better at, but our goal is still to produce high quality, nutrient dense food. I think that's a brilliant place to wrap. Thank you so much, Emily, for taking the time to come and speak to us today. I know more about the AHDB than I did before, which is excellent. I think there's there is definitely a role to play, isn't there, for everybody. And it's just trying to, as we move through this next phase of agriculture, where we want to be in 5 years' time, where everyone's place is, and making sure that we're getting value for money, and that I suppose from my point of view, that the levy payer is getting value for money. And that's back to our first question, is how do we make sure that we do get value for our levy payer money?
Yeah, absolutely. Get involved, Ali. That's my one piece of advice. Get involved.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Emily. Thank you for your time. We're going to take a break.
You're so welcome.
If you run a farm or business, you know that paperwork changes faster than the weather. Case in point, HMRC's Making Tax Digital for Income Tax is arriving this April. Now, if you use profit averaging to manage those fluctuating years, there's some good news. You've likely secured a deferral until April 2027. But while that gives you some breathing space, it doesn't mean your current receipt system isn't reaching its expiration date. And that's where TELUS Farm Accounting comes in. Their software is built specifically for the unique complexities of farming, like profit averaging and seasonal cash flow. Its MTD ready streamlines your record keeping and makes those upcoming quarterly updates a breeze. Whether your deadline is this year or next, TELUS helps you stay compliant so you can spend less time on admin and more on farming. Get ahead of the curve at telus.com/MTD and speak to their UK-based team today. And welcome back. Well, this actually leads us nicely on to our next topic for the day, which is International Women's Day. International Women's Day happened on Sunday, and it's something that's being celebrated in the farming sector, and rightly so, don't you think, Soph?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as a sector, we've come such a long way. I mean, it was very much a male, pale, stale. Sorry, Ali. Industry. I, as a kid, never knew I could go into farming, let alone run a dairy farm. We employ a lot of girls on farm, and I think that International Women's Day is about empowering them and knowing their importance. The other thing is this year is the UN's Women's Farming Year. So that's another thing that's being recognised, and that's a global initiative to highlight the women's role in agriculture. How do you feel about International Women's Day as a bloke?
Well, as a white male and stale, stereotypical middle-aged farmer, so I think it's great. And also, I guess I have to fight the corner a bit from my mother's side, who she's been farming for 40 odd years. She used to be pretty much the only woman in the market back in the day, and now, like you say, there's young girls, ladies. It has come on so much in the agricultural sector. I don't know. You still go to the NFU conference though, and it's still very much a male-dominated sector, which I think is changing, as it should. I think there's a slight fear amongst the men in the room that actually you're a lot better than we are, and that's a problem, and that's something that our egos can't take. But it's fantastic, isn't it? It's fantastic that it's now spoken about as a genuine opportunity, whichever sector you're in. There was always this sort of stereotype of male strength was the reason that you went into farming, whereas actually that's not true.
Absolutely. And I saw a lot when I was traveling, I'm going to say the N word, Nuffield. When I was traveling a lot, I saw a lot of situations where they were empowering women within the farms, because it was the first time women had control of their own finances. And that's a big thing when you're in a developing country. Often it was the male's role to run the farm, but actually by putting it across to the women, it was enabling them to have some choices in life. And that is actually a really powerful thing that I think we don't really probably think about outside of our farm gate.
It's always interesting to try and look at it from an international angle, isn't it? Whereas, here we look at it as a slightly different way, where women's rights have been getting stronger throughout the last however many decades, but we've probably been streets ahead of some of the developing countries, or are streets ahead of some of the developing countries. So actually, what it means to them is not quite life or death, but very different to maybe what it means to us in the UK. Each way, it's important. It's important to try and reach some sort of equality. I don't think in my lifetime we'll get to 50-50 in farming. Maybe we will. Maybe I'm not right there, but I think we've got a long way still to go. But the fact that these courses, look at your staff, is a prime example. They're pretty much all female, or most of them are.
Mostly.
Yeah, exactly. But whereas, I don't know, maybe 25, 30 years ago, it wouldn't have been like that. So we have come a long way, and there's so many I could list fantastic female farmers now that are prevalent. They're also on social media, and I think that's really helped. I think the fact that you can tell your story as a female farmer has really helped. I think it has helped in general, but there is there is a real opportunity to carry on growing the sector. And I think that's only a good thing.
And I think it's interesting from a woman's point of view. I always think it's the right person for the job. So a lot of us, actually, the job has now become, as we've mechanicalized things, the job can actually be for us as well. So it's sort of eliminated that part of it, and we can be the right person for the job. None of us want to be in a position because we are a female. And I think that's the big thing, isn't it? And I think it also changes your point of view, your view on things when you have children and when you have daughters. I don't know about you, but when I've got two girls like you have, for them, I want them to have every opportunity that a male has.
Yeah, and I had the same, and so when we had the twins, and obviously we had a boy and a girl, and I had the classic, I bet you're glad you got a boy. Bet you're glad you've got a boy. I was like, no, not really. Like, if India, the eldest or whatever, if she wants to farm, then brilliant. That's fantastic. It would make no difference to me as a father which of my children would like to take over the farm, if any. But it is, and it's also that point you made is so important. So you don't want to feel like you're getting the job because you need to be raising some equality situation. You get the job because you are the best person for that job, and that's something that when we get into all of this equality stuff, and we won't breach too far into it, is that you need to be able to choose as an employer. You need to be able to choose the right person for the job, and their gender, sex, whichever way it is, it shouldn't come into it. It should be the best person for the job on the day, the best person that interviewed, the person that you think can take your business forward. But the chances of that now being a woman, I would say, have increased significantly than they were in the last 10, 15 years.
And I think, like you highlighted earlier, it's like having positive role models. I've had a lot of positive role models in agriculture that have probably empowered me to do more than I probably would have done. I probably wouldn't have thought at all about it as a career. So it's, keeping those positive role models. I mean, we could talk for hours about International Women's Day, equality, all of the above. But I think we're done for today. I would like to thank everyone for listening. Please subscribe to the show if you don't already. Message us on socials or comment below if you're watching on YouTube, or email thebigdebate@ruralpodmedia.co.uk. And please also sign up for our mailing list, which the link is in the show notes. Thank you to our headline sponsor, Virgin Money, as well as our associate partners, Birketts and TELUS Agriculture and Consumer Goods. Please subscribe and share. Don't forget to check out our latest bonus episode with Birketts on seasonal workers. We've got now a reel of women in agriculture who'd like to share a message to other women in agriculture. We'll see you in a fortnight.
My main message to other women in the agricultural sector would be to say a huge thank you. You cannot be what you cannot see, and we are so lucky to have so many inspiring women in farming, women who inspire you to reach for your North Star and to play a full and active role in the farming community. For me, that's been the likes of Sarah Bell and Anna Jones, founder of Just Farmers, as well as all of the women who describe themselves as just a farmer's wife or I'm just a farmer's daughter, when actually in reality, they are keeping their businesses and their shows on the road, often behind the scenes, often without much fanfare. But I know for a fact, without all of those women out there, the UK farming industry would look very, very different without them.
Hi everyone, just a quick message from the sheep world here. Over the 20 years or so I've worked in this industry, I have gone from a team where I was the only woman to working in a team that was completely female dominated. And I would say that the best approach is that we make sure we surround ourselves and work with people that we respect, who show us the same respect, bring new ideas to the table, and that we can look beyond the gender. Every new perspective helps us rethink how we can manage our flocks, how we utilise the data, and how we make decisions that genuinely move flocks and farms forward. So if you're working with the sheep industry and putting your ideas into action, keep going. Your contribution makes this industry stronger.
I'm Rona Jordan, Director of Agriculture for Virgin Money in Aberdeenshire. Women have always played a vital role in agriculture, but it's particularly encouraging to see more women now stepping into prominent roles across the industry. It's especially evident in the livestock sector, where their leadership, skills and influence are becoming increasingly visible. The businesses that I work with, it's great to see sons and daughters treated as equals, working together, sharing responsibility and contributing to the success and sustainability of the family business.
Hi, it's Annabelle Rout from Birketts. Just sharing my message for all those women involved in agriculture on International Women's Day. I want to say what fantastic work they do, often behind the scenes, leading successful businesses in the agricultural industry and inspiring future generations of farmers and young people working in agriculture. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Kate and I work at TELUS Agriculture. To all the women in this industry, whether you're farming, leading teams, innovating, or breaking barriers, I want to say you are essential. We grow the food that feeds the world, we lead with resilience, and we're shaping the future of agriculture. On International Women's Day, I celebrate each of you. Your strength, your knowledge, and your vision matter. Keep pushing forward. We've got this.
For International Women's Day, a quote that's always inspired me is that there's no dream that you can dream that the world hasn't dreamed bigger for you. And it's a reminder that sometimes we limit ourselves, we doubt our capabilities, but we've got to be brave enough to seize those opportunities and see where they lead. And the other thing is about identifying your cheerleaders and people that you can lean on who'll support you and have your corner, and being that person for someone else and really just building that network of amazing people to lift you up when things get tough.
We've made significant progress in the last decade in that women have always been present in the industry, but now have more presence in our industry. And I see that at events. But more importantly, I know the next generation see that. And the pace of change means that we will continue to improve. But right now, I recognise that takes positive encouragement, active support, and needs champions around us. It's that thing of you'll be what you can see. And I know I owe it to my daughter to stand proudly in that space and to support others to do so.
Thank you for listening to Meet the Farmers, The Big Debate. Our headline sponsor for this episode was Virgin Money, whose agricultural team has years of experience in supporting farmers up and down the UK. Meet the Farmers, The Big Debate is supported by UK top 50 law firm Birketts. Birketts expert lawyers can help you manage your estates, businesses and assets. From succession planning to environmental compliance, Birketts offer practical, tailored advice to your needs. Whether you're a landowner, farmer, or agribusiness specialist, the team can support you in achieving your goals and safeguarding your future. Find out more today at www.birketts.co.uk/ag.